What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV, and today we are going to be reacting to Micky Van de Ven's interview with Gary Neville on the overlap. When I first heard this coming out, and I was like thinking, oh God, I was getting all these flashbacks to Harry Kane. I was like, this better not be on a bloody golf course. I swear, if it's on a golf course, I'm going to go absolutely mad here. But look, it wasn't. It was in his home. His dad was next to him. It was nice and calm. But yeah, some interesting stuff. It was a really good interview. So if you haven't seen it, do go and watch it, because I really enjoyed every second of it, to be honest.
An hour, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's really good, in-depth stuff. We're just going to be covering like the Tottenham portions, but there's a lot of good stuff about his upbringing and his roles at former clubs as well. So you go watch the full thing, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in this.
His dad's an interesting guy.
Yeah, don't want to get on the wrong side of him. Definitely not.
His dad was like Special Forces. Mickey had no idea what his dad was doing when he was younger. And he was like, he told him all the stories after it's all said and done. And it was just like, wow, what a guy.
Unbelievable. He's worked in TV as well. He's into a proper interesting life, interesting career. So, and he's helping him, you know, fulfill his dream as a footballer, and also with transfers and stuff. So, I really hope he's not pushing for those big moves, but we'll see.
But one thing that does just scream at you is the ambition that Micky Van de Ven has. You know, he said that he wants to be the best defender in the world, not even just one of, just the best defender in the world. Look, but I think he already is one of. Would you say he's in the top 10 of defenders in the world?
Top 10 centre-backs. Oof. I mean, there are so many clubs who think they've got incredible centre-backs, but it's hard to argue. Well, he doesn't even start centre-back for his national side, does he? But I can't, off the top of my head, it's hard for me to think of 10 better ones off the top of my head. So you could definitely say he's got a shout, but I think he maybe has to do it for a bit longer. But I definitely think he's got an argument to be there.
Yeah. But look, let's get into some of these quotes. So where are we going to start?
So we will start when he was talking about, you know, signing for Tottenham, you know, his original talks with Daniel Levy and Ange. He said Daniel spoke about how he looked at the club and he had a really good vision for the club. The stadium and the facilities were unbelievable. But Ange was the one who really said to me, we're going to win silverware. And at this point, I thought, I like this. And then he also spoke about getting bantered by his friends. He said, when I joined Tottenham, I knew that was going to come. My best friend who was on my shoulder, he's a Liverpool fan. He says, are you going to join Tottenham? You're never going to win a trophy. And I was like, yeah, cheers, mate. But at that point, I said to him, look, I'm going to change it. I'm going to be part of that change. I'm like this. I like the philosophy of Tottenham. And he said, yeah, everyone says they're going to change it. But he said, no, I'm the actual one who is actually going to do it. And obviously he did. Yeah,
he was part of the team that definitely changed things. And look, if it wasn't for Micky Van de Ven, we probably don't even win that final with that overhead kick towards the end. You know what I mean? So he had a massive say in us winning that trophy, and he was one of the ones that changed it. So credit to him. But it's true, like every player that we've signed probably said the same thing, like, I'm going to be the one to change it. But look, this current group are the ones that change it. But in terms of his conversation with Ange, I mean, we said it, the Ange pull, the one thing that Ange does have is those kind of his way with words, you know, and his pull on the heartstrings is, I think, I don't know if you've got the quote, but he mentions it a lot.
The next one, He says, before every game, every meeting, Ange would stand there in front of the group, and every time he spoke to us, we were like, we're going to smoke everyone. Then when the results weren't going away, it was difficult to come out of negative momentum. But he was telling how he said Ange is like that one coach for him that has just always made him feel something, you know, before games, and made the whole team always super confident they were going to go out and win well. And that was like one of Ange's big attributes.
Yeah, and I can understand that, because like, as much as I criticise Ange a lot, you know, particularly in the second season while he was here, but I did say to you on a number of occasions, like, I would criticise him, but then I'll listen to him in his press conference, and I'll be buying back into again, but then I see the team for the 90 minutes, and then I kind of, oh, for God's sake, here we go again. But no, like, that was his strongest attribute, Ange, in my opinion, was the way with his words, his motivational speeches and that kind of stuff. And we all saw that motivational speech just before the Europa League final. And I think even every fan was pumped up, never mind the players.
Yeah, 100%. And you could see clearly And he says he speaks about that speech in the Europa League and how much it meant. But he goes on to talk about Ange. He was saying how the first 10 games the football was amazing and we were flying. But then he goes on to say. Managers these days, they analyse everything. They have 4 or 5 people around them who analyse everything about the opponent. And at that point, people knew what we were doing. And sometimes we didn't really have a plan B. So we were getting exposed without having solutions. When we were getting further in the Europa League, sometimes we would sit down with him and say, we need to adapt. And that wasn't only with him. There was always also with his assistants and other coaches. So that he was talking about... Look, I guess what a lot of people have said, that we played this very attractive way of football, good football, but sometimes when we needed to change things, when we were getting exposed, we were getting exposed. Essentially, that's what we were saying.
Yeah, and
but he goes on to say as well, a lot of it was to do with injuries as well to our main players, which obviously affected things.
Yeah, I do feel like the way he was talking about Ange, obviously he holds him in very high regard, but I felt like as well that. What I got from it is that he enjoyed playing under Ange and he enjoyed the style of play, but he also didn't agree with certain sections of it in terms of how exposed it would leave the team. And he said as well in the interview, like sometimes it was all on me just to get us out that trouble with my pace. And he said that he felt that we were getting too exposed, and he likes playing attractive attacking football, but he doesn't like, obviously, the way how easy it was to expose us.
Yes, yeah, he did say that. But one thing I would say is there was a point in the interview he was talking about Bilbao, and he was talking about Ange's half-time team talk about we're going to defend this lead, and basically he said at that point that then he realised, yeah, he can change things because these are different instructions than what he's used to here. And obviously we'll go on to it. He was talking about how they had changed things up in the Europa League run. He says at one point we just walked up to the gaffer and said we need to change some things and play more defensive sometimes. We played away at Frankfurt, we were 1-0 up and we can't keep attacking. We just need to come back and have a low block and make sure we get 3 points. I think he meant goes to the next round. We sat with him and he agreed with us on some things, and he told us that he expected us 2 guys to sort this on the pitch to make sure this is something everybody knows and to speak to everybody on the pitch. He said to me and Kuti personally that we need to make sure the other guys listen to us, that we have a reputation in the team and everyone respects us, so make sure the guys follow what we say on the pitch. So Kuti and I were just screaming at everyone. He also went on to say he had the discussions with him and Ange about going more defensive, and then they had a big meeting Ange started to implement a few more things, he said, kind of defensively. But obviously he's saying they instigated it, Ange agreed with it, and obviously we went on to be a bit more pragmatic in the Europa League and ended up winning it. But interesting stuff. Him saying that him and Kuti were the ones who were like basically went to tell Ange we have to be more defensive. Yeah,
it's a strange dynamic that the players are going up to Ange and being like, look, you need to change the way you're playing if we want to go and win this Europa League. And I don't know why Ange wasn't the one to recognise this, and Ange wasn't the one to kind of make the first move and instruct the players, look, if we want to win this trophy, this is what we got to do. It was actually the players that instigated it, which I don't think it says so much about Ange's tactical flexibility or anything like that. But why did this not happen earlier? Why did this not happen kind of when we were losing week in, week out? Why does this only happen?
Playing, I guess.
Yeah, it's true. But why isn't Ange the one making this decision or coming up with these kind of ideas?
Well, he did make the decision, but obviously I think it's commonplace in squads that players have. It's not like players don't have a say. I'm sure every week
it's not about players not having a say. It's about Ange recognising the deficiencies and the shortcomings and not addressing it, waiting for the players to come and address the kind of shortcomings in the team. Whereas the manager should be the first one to recognise it.
Mm-hmm. And that's fair. But look, at the end of the day, they changed it up. They did adapt. He did adapt, and I think there was evidence that he could adapt by the end of it. But
the players kind of forced him to adapt.
Well, they didn't force him. They suggested he didn't have to do it.
Of course, but it was like the player's idea to adapt. It wasn't the manager's idea
It was
to
the
do it.
coaches as well. Like it was a
Well, they got them both. He said they got them both in a meeting, the coaches and the manager, and they said, look, we can't be.
Agreed.
Yeah, 100%, and we can't keep being this exposed. And I'm just there thinking like Ange is the manager. He's watching this play out in front of us. He's obviously seen how easy it is to attack against us. Like, why did he not implement this a lot earlier than maybe the Europa League run? I just didn't get it.
Well, no, I think as well it should be the manager who does it first, obviously. But I also think, I don't think it's a problem necessarily. It's a problem that he doesn't recognise it first, 100%. But I don't think it's a bad thing that the players and the manager have a meeting and discuss things and they come to an agreement. I think
obviously
that's
it's not a bad thing because it resulted in us winning the trophy. If we didn't do that,
just in general, just listening to your players, that's not a bad thing.
Yeah, but they obviously had these concerns beforehand because he was saying, "Oh, we don't have a plan B, we don't have this, we don't have that," and it's all very nice playing attacking football, and we enjoy playing attacking football, but it can't be that we're this exposed every week, and we didn't like this. So obviously they had issues with the way that they were playing beforehand, and it got to a certain point when they were close to winning a trophy and they knew it's in their grasp for them to actually speak up. But actually what should have happened is Ange should have recognised it a lot earlier.
He said on the final, on the final in half-time, he said, "Okay, boys, we keep pressing, but sometimes when it doesn't work, just drop back and make sure you lock the back door." That was the point where I looked at him and I was like, yeah, he can adapt.
Till his last game.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was his last game.
So the players only believed that Ange could adapt in his last game for Tottenham.
Well, I'm sure before that because we all got to the final, but yeah, that's what Van de Ven said. He said, yeah, but look, I think they'd always had full belief in him, I think. Especially as a manager. Maybe you can argue, maybe not as a coach, but as a manager, I think we definitely, they always responded to his words. He said in general, I like the offensive football, but I also like that we have what we have now with Frank, now that we are much more secure in the back and not getting exposed in some situations. I don't know if this was recorded before the Forest game or not, but he said, I really like the offensive football, but I don't like to be exposed every game on the counter-attack. But he goes on to say about Ange, he says, Ange really believed in his system, and even today, I still believe in his system because we played such an unbelievable football. So the system works, but we needed to adapt a bit more. Yeah.
And look, I think a lot of fans were saying at the time, we just need a bit more adaptability from Ange. And yes, fine, it came in the Europa League run, the Frankfurt game, the Boda game, and the final. But like I said before, it should have come a lot earlier, and we should have seen more adaptations in the Premier League throughout the season. It's not just about the Europa League run, albeit the Europa League one was great, and it culminated in the best night of our lives in terms of Bilbao. But this is what we kept saying, and a lot of fans kept saying that we need to see more adaptability on a general basis. So yeah, I agree with him.
But he says he believes in the system, and the system works because it plays unbelievable football.
Yeah.
But a lot of people saying the system doesn't work. It was a rubbish system.
The system worked to a certain amount of time, but he said the system worked in the first few months under Ange, but then teams worked us out, and then it didn't really work, and kind of teams worked us out, and there was no adaptability, and there was no plan B.
Well, a lot of it was, he said, also due to injuries.
Yeah, I think it was both, bit of both.
But I think if we had a deeper squad, maybe it wouldn't have been as found out as it was. You know what I mean?
But I felt like in the interview, like he obviously showed a lot of love towards Ange Postecoglou, but I think there were some like sort of constructive criticisms in there towards Ange as well.
Which is fair. I think no manager's perfect.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, but I don't know. He seemed to be when I was watching his face, I'm not no body language expert, but he seemed to like his face would kind of glow a bit when he was talking about Ange. He seemed to like really fondly talk about him, in my opinion. Like he was talking when he spoke about when he was sacked. He said he couldn't believe it. He said he was shocked. He said it really did shock him when he was sacked, and he still thinks he's a really good manager. Obviously, he texted him when he was sacked. And I think a lot of when you hear a lot of players, not necessarily about this specific manager. When you hear players talk about managers who do get sacked, they usually say things like, "Oh, this is football. Nothing really surprises you anymore." That kind of stuff. But that kind of surprised me. I know he said it before in an interview, but it surprised me that he was so. Because should it have been that much of a surprise that he was sacked? There was a lot of talk about it before the final and stuff like that, about how he was on his way out and stuff, and the board had made a decision. So the fact that he was so shocked, kind of, don't know, did that maybe imply to me he didn't want him to go?
Look, I think when you have such a journey and it culminates in, I know the season's so hard, right? 17, 22 losses, all that. We've been through it so many times. But when you end up winning the trophy and it brings everyone together at that parade, all the fans, all the players, the management, everyone was on the same hymn sheet. And I don't think that night, after we celebrated the parade, I don't think anyone would have said we should sack Ange right now. I think everyone was just like, you know what, give him another season, give him another crack at the whip and see where we go. With the players, it would have been even more than that, than what the fans are feeling, because they know what Ange is like behind. They've got those motivational talks and maybe they thought, maybe he can bring a new adaptation period after what he showed in the Europa League, So I think they grew that kind of personal connection massively during that kind of Europa League run, after it's gone so badly in the Premier League and they're kind of getting battered by the press week in, week out, and it ends in a success. It ends in you winning the Europa League. So yeah, from their kind of point of view, I kind of understand why they're a bit surprised, because they've just witnessed and they've just tasted this big success together. But I think when you do look at the bigger picture and the way it kind of did end up with the league and you put everything in it together, I still stand by that it was probably the right decision. Do I stand by that it was the right decision to replace him for Frank? I don't know. At this point in time, I'm questioning that big time, but I can see it from both ways, to be honest. I can see why the players were a bit surprised, but I can also see why the club did it as well.
I can understand why the club did it. Look, we've been through it so many times over this topic, but obviously I don't think it was the right decision. I think we should have given him another season to see what he can do. I think the players were behind him. That's the main thing. I think they knew how to play the good football. They had that. And now, after the Europa League, they had that adaptability as well, potentially. They had that in their locker after winning that Europa League. And hopefully as well, they changed a few things, when Van de Ven came back from injury and Romero, and they, keeping them fit, and they changed a few things with medical staff at the end of the season to try and keep them fit. So, look, the season was an absolute mess, but I thought by the end of it, maybe there were signs that the following season there could be some positive things to come out of it. And obviously, everyone was so together after the trophy win. You take that momentum into next season. Look, We'll never know. We'll never know what would happen if we would have kept Ange on. I was watching Van de Ven. He had definitely had constructive criticisms of what happened, but he clearly was very fond of Ange, and clearly was like excited when talking about him. He loved talking about the football they were playing. He's like, we felt like we could smoke anyone. He was almost like felt on top of the world. You could see that. And when he talks about what Frank was doing, he doesn't talk about it with the same excitement, although the words say, like, I like what Frank's doing, but he doesn't talk about it with the same excitement he spoke about Ange. Yeah,
because he hasn't tasted that success and hasn't been on that journey with Frank yet. Frank's still fairly new to the job, where Ange brought him to the club. They spent 2 years together, and it ended up being a Europa League success, and they won a trophy. So it makes sense why he's not glowing talking about Frank, and he's glowing speaking about Ange.
That's true, but I bet you interview Van de Ven 16 games into being managed by Frank, and she probably speaks about him in a similar way.
Yeah, but I also felt like when he was speaking about Ange, he was saying, yeah, fine, we felt like we could smoke everyone, but then they went on that big period of like losing games, and they couldn't quite work it out, because Ange didn't have a plan B, and they found it hard to turn around those kind of results.
Mm-hmm.
So
but you're going to have that in your first season.
Yeah, of course, but for a manager not to have a plan B, that's got to be a little bit demoralizing when you're going through this kind of run of losses and you can't figure a way to turn it around. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to be, like he mentions, you need to be more adaptable, and he only showed that like 2 3/4 years in, or 1 year and 3
But he
quarters.
did show it in the end.
Yeah, he did show it in the end because the players went up to him and told him he has to show it.
But he agreed, and they won the trophy.
Yeah, and credit for him to agreeing, because if he didn't agree, I don't think we win the trophy.
All right, so he goes on to Thomas Frank, and he says the new gaffer has came in, and he has a new way of playing and thoughts about the game. When he came in pre-season, it was him teaching us everything about his system, because we're going to need to play a totally different system compared to Ange. Now it's a lot of walkthroughs and technical stuff before every game. We do some tactical work about the opponent. The meetings and everything is the same as it was under Ange in terms of scouting the opponent. It's different, of course, the way Ange thinks about football and how Frank thinks about football. The meetings are the same, but it's a lot of walkthroughs we do with Frank. You play so many games, so we just go out and walk through everything. It's Italian style. So I thought that was interesting, because you would have thought. He said, obviously, does it make sense? The way Frank wants to play is very different to Ange. I think we've seen that. But he says the meetings and everything is the same as it was under Ange in terms of scouting the opponent. Now, that I found interesting, because the narrative is Ange didn't focus on the opposition. He's just focused on the way we play, and that was what he does. And whereas Frank is very detail-oriented, he would go into finding little things about the opponent and much more detail-oriented than Ange and his coaching staff. But he's saying, I don't know whether he means it, or maybe it's not, he doesn't mean it as he's saying it, but he says the meetings, everything is the same as it was under Ange in terms of scouting the opponent. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, that was interesting, and I'm not sure whether to rethink the position on Ange, whether he doesn't care about the opponent too much, or we're putting too much focus on Frank, putting too much focus on the opposition. So I'm not sure which kind of way to think about it.
Yeah, so because you would have thought if I asked you what's the biggest difference between Frank and Ange, you'd probably say that.
Yeah.
Before Frank came in. So the fact he's saying it's similar or the same, doesn't really make sense. Now, when he says walkthroughs in a very Italian style, I immediately think of Conte. Because Conte used to do those 11 versus 0 training sessions where he would just tell people how to, on the ball, tactically, how to pass. Is that what he means by that? Obviously, he wasn't managed under Conte here, so he didn't know what it was like. But.
When I think of Italian walkthroughs, I think of just thinking of reworking defensive structures and stuff like that. That's what I think of when he thinks about Italian walkthroughs. Like just very focused on defensive structures.
So that's cool. Yeah, that's quite interesting. Obviously, we know about Frank coming in and doing things completely differently. And then he goes on to say the aim for Tottenham this season is to get back in the Champions League, top 5, top 4. He never said whether he thought it was realistic or not. He talked to a lot of fans who think our players are terrible. They would say it's not. But he says that's what the aim is.
The thing is, right, if Frank can sort of turn it around. The league is so tight; it's within our grasp. We can do it.
Well, Villa's the ultimate.
Yeah, Villa. You know, you look at Everton as well. They were like down the bottom, and now they're like in like what 7th or 8th around there. Like, there's so many examples of it. Like, it's just so up and down. You put 3 wins together, you're probably there, like near the top 4. So I don't subscribe to the notion that these players are not good enough to finish in the top 4, top 5. I think we've got a good enough squad to make a fist of it. So that's on Thomas Frank to really work around it and try and get some consistent results. Because I think any team that puts a consistent run together are going to be within a shout of getting in that top 4, top 5. And I don't think that's, at the moment it's hard to envisage it because we're just so poor week in, week out. But you never know what could be around the corner, and sometimes it can just suddenly click under a new manager, and then suddenly you put 3 or 4 wins behind you and you're right up there. So it's going to be interesting to see the way it works, but I think that should be our aim, top 4, top 5.
Of course, that's every season that should be the aim. Obviously after finishing 17th. But the thing is, when I hear Van de Ven say that, and then I hear Frank saying, remember we finished 17th last season. So is that not Frank's aim? Because if he's saying that, that's not the words of a guy who believes we can challenge for top 5 this season, is it? When he says, remember we finished 17th last season after a bad game.
I think just Frank just seems a bit under pressure and he's just trying to make excuses for a few bad performances. But I think at the start of the season that would have been what he thought the aim was. And I still think he does think the aim is that. And I think, you know, the league is so volatile, man. Like, just like I said before, a few wins and you're right up there. So,
do you reckon that's what the club had told him this season? The aim is to get back in the Champions League again.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's what the club tell every manager when they come in.
But then, so why are we talking about transition and big resets and rebuilds if it's to get top 5?
Well, I just think when you're looking at the league table, no matter if you're in a transition or what, like, there's no standout candidates. You know what I mean? You got the top 3, Arsenal or Liverpool, but who knows what's going on with Liverpool? They've dropped off. You got Arsenal and Man City. Apart from that, I mean, you know, it's like fair game for everyone. Everyone's kind of like either have never made it there before, or you know, some are slightly ahead, some are slightly behind. Like, this league is so kind of open, it's crazy. So I think whether you're in a transition or not, I still think it's a realistic possibility.
Yeah, I think so as well. I don't doubt that if you put a run together, but I just wonder what the remit is, what the messaging is from inside the club, and what Frank generally believes. Because I don't know, from what I get from Frank, and I don't want to harp on about him, but what I get from his body language and his words, he doesn't seem to me like a guy who truly believes we're going to be challenging for top 5 this season. That's just the sense I get. But the players think they should. So I'd wonder if there's a disconnect there, or I don't know, is it leading to frustration? Maybe that's why there's frustration with Frank or from some of the players. I don't know.
What I think is that I don't think he wants to put the players and the squad and the club under too much pressure. I think that's what it is right now. And, you know, he's in a new job. He's just trying to figure out everything. He doesn't know his best 11. He's trying to chop and change and find it and everything like that. So he said it on a few occasions that he doesn't want these players to play under pressure. Mm-hmm. So I don't think he wants to put that pressure on the team through the press. But I think he thinks... I genuinely think that the club have told him that this is what the aim should be, and I think he accepts it. I think that's what the aim should be of this club every single season. I don't think this season is any different. Mm-hmm. I just think it's more or less of a pressure thing, and that's his way of trying to manoeuvre that.
But there are some fans who say, you know, top 8, that's a good season and big improvement in the league.
Which it is, on the face of things, as we did finish 17th last season. It is an improvement on that, but it's not a place where fans will be happy with, because I guarantee you, if we finish 8th this season, a lot of fans will be kicking up a fuss, like saying, how do we finish 8th?
Well, it's just, it's not exactly where we want to be, is
exactly.
It? If the remit's to get back in the Champions League, you're not going to do that with finishing 8th.
The thing is, though, like, even if we don't finish in the top 5 and we finish 6th or 7th, like, I know it's not where we want to be, and it won't be seen as a disaster, I don't think.
No. If we get back in Europe, I think it's acceptable. I mean, as long as the performances improve, I guess.
Yeah. We just need to see an upward trajectory. That's the reality. So where the 4th, 5th might be the aim of the club, if we just fall short on it, but you can see a vision for next season where we can get in there realistically, then I think most fans will be all right with that.
But in terms of when you listen to Van de Ven, when I understand it went wrong and he had criticisms of being exposed, but when you're playing some of the football we did under Ange, and now we're playing the football that we're seeing at the moment, how do you think it affects someone with his kind of mentality when you're seeing what you're seeing on the pitch? Do you think? I know he says, I like the fact that we're not as exposed, and that's fine, but look at how we're playing football. We barely touch the opposition's penalty box now. Like, do you think is he getting on board with that, do you think?
I mean, he cuts a very frustrated figure on the pitch. That's the reality from what we're seeing. And I think that you would, when you see the players that we've got, and we should be, you know, teams like Burnley create more chances than us. They scored 2 goals on the weekend, you know. They create more chances than us in some games. In 45 minutes of football, they created more of an XG than Arsenal than we did.
You know, they average more shots on target than we do.
Yeah,
90.
I know, and it's not good enough. But I don't know. It's hard to really kind of assess it. But right now, they do cut for straight figures on the pitch, most of the players. So I think there are frustrations there, but hopefully they believe in it, and hopefully it can turn around soon. There's not much more we can say on it. Or, like, we don't know what they're actually thinking. But what he is saying is that he likes the kind of defensive structure that Frank has put in place, or trying to put in place.
A lot of people saying this is a start of a PR move to facilitate a move in next summer.
I mean, look, he said he wants to be the best defender in the world, and to be the best defender in the world, he probably wants to win trophies, win the biggest trophies, and be at the biggest clubs. So I have no doubt that Van de Ven wants to be at a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or one of these kind of clubs. And I'm sure he'll get there one day. It's just a shame that we need to grow with Mickey. It's the same case like we needed to grow with Harry Kane, but we couldn't. We couldn't grow with Harry Kane because the club wasn't run in that kind of way. So let's hope that the club is going to start to be run in that kind of way, that we can grow with our stars that we do have. And at the moment, it doesn't look that way, but you never know what's around the corner.
Right.
He did say as well, though, that about the injuries and stuff, and he's like, the way that Ange played put a lot of strain on the players, and he didn't exactly say that it caused a lot of injuries, but I felt like he did mean that.
Well, what he said was when you're pressing every 3 days, obviously it puts a lot of strain on your body, and I that's fair. That tells me we needed a deeper squad.
Yeah, that as well.
For sure, rather than anything else. But yeah, obviously it caused injuries, but we had such a lack of depth. He didn't trust a lot of the other players to step in.
But that's another reason why we should have had a plan B and adapted a lot earlier. Like, if the players know that the style of football, if the manager knows that the style of football is putting a lot of strain on the squad, and you don't have a deep squad, you need to adapt.
Right, I understand that, but that's his way of playing. That's the manager he is. So the club should rather adapt to him rather than him adapting to having an awful squad. You know what I mean?
Correct. But I completely agree with that. The club should have given him what he needed to succeed in the job. I don't disagree. But once you're in it, the transfer window's shut, and you're in that season, you're getting injuries, and everyone can see what's going on. At that point, you've got to adapt. I
understand that. It's fair. That's a fair comment. I also honestly don't know if there's like a situation where you just, every game we're going to... Because then you're just completely changing the way he plays, in a way. Maybe in some games you have to adapt more. I get that. And probably should have. But once it's all said and done, the whole season was a mess, injuries, whatever. We had lots of problems, right? But I don't think that all the problems, I would say, is his fault, was my point. So as much as we went through all that, we had all these problems, and we came out with success. So you learn from those problems, and then you adjust to them. You give him a deeper squad. You learn from he will learn from what happened last season. The club will learn, and then you go again. And we know when it's good, and as Van de Ven said, when the system works, it works. And they all believed. I think if he's saying that, I think they all believed in the system when it worked. He played very good football. So he had showed adaptations. Hopefully, you learn from what you were doing in the squad and injuries and all that kind of stuff. And then I think you had everyone believing. So there was so much going for it, but. Look, we decided to sack him, and we decided to go another way. I disagreed with it, but I understand, it probably did cause injuries, but I think we maybe took the wrong lessons from the injuries.
The reality is,
because look how many injuries Arsenal are getting, right? Because is that because Arteta plays it probably is. He plays a very intense system, but what happens is they've got a very deep squad to deal with it. And that's the difference.
Yeah, but it's the same thing, isn't it? Ange, as much as he had his flaws, fell foul of probably the same reason every other manager at Tottenham has fallen by the wayside, right? Not given the tools they need to succeed in the job. Conte was the same, Mourinho was the same, Poch at the end was the same. You know what I mean? All these managers end up being the same. So,
and I think for me, we take the wrong lessons from it. They're not given the tools, and then we end up sacking them. Yeah. And I think for me, that's the wrong lesson.
Does Frank have the tools?
The thing is with Frank, does he have the tools for what? To be playing, to have more than a shot on target and have more shots on target than Burnley per game? Yeah, he has the tools for that. Does he have the tools to be outright favourites to be in the top 4 or 5? No, he doesn't. We're going to have to overperform to do that. Should he be good? Should he be able to overperform? He obviously did it with Brentford, so hopefully we can do it here. But I don't know. Depends what we're asking him for. Does he have the tools to be in a European spot challenge? 100%, in my opinion. Yeah. He definitely does. Doesn't mean are we much better than Newcastle and Brighton and Bournemouth? Are we much better than them? No, we're not. But do I think we should be competing with them and be playing a lot better than we are? 100%.
Yeah, I agree with that. Look, I think there's no reason with the squad that we've got we shouldn't be in the top 7.
Yeah.
That's where we're at, I think. And to think that we should be 100% in the top 4, I think, is deluded. But to think that we should be nowhere near the top 7, I think, is also deluded. So I think we need to be somewhere around that kind of, at least top 7, at least.
And at least have a game plan that gets us more chances. Like at the moment, it's just tragic watching us. It really is. How can you have a team? Look at Burnley's front line. They have more shots on target per game than us. That's madness.
Yeah.
That's crazy. How is that acceptable in any way?
Yeah. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. But the only thing that we have to cling on, because I don't think it doesn't seem like Frank's going anywhere anytime soon.
No.
So he needs to turn it around, and he needs to turn it around quick. But look, this isn't about Frank and about what he can do.
Van de Ven made it about Frank and Ange.
Yeah. But look, it was actually Gary Neville did.
Gary Neville, yeah.
I was very happy that not one suggestion of leaving Tottenham, so that was great. But no, it was a really good interview, so go and check it out on The Overlap on YouTube. And let us know your thoughts on it in the comment section below. And we'll see you soon, guys. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always,
Come on, you Spurs.
Come on, you Spurs.